What's going on, Broncos country? Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports. Matthew Peterson here with a fun show lined out for everyone today. We'll talk Courtland Sutton, and then we'll look at Pro Football Focus's breakout candidate for Denver. Now, I mentioned this in yesterday's video, but if you missed it, I got my wisdom teeth pulled over the weekend. Still not really 100%, so apologies for sort of lack of energy and honestly just looking like Bugs Bunny up here. But let's start things off by looking at number 14 because Bleacher Report put out an article with a whole bunch of veteran wide receiver trade candidates, and surprise, surprise, Courtland Sutton was included. Now, Denver's initial asking price, if you don't remember, back when the Courtland Sutton rumors were really at its peak, was rumored to be around a second rounder, or maybe they could slip to a third, but it was never quite clear, never quite published exactly what they wanted. Now, what I do want to also remind everyone here is Denver was rumored to nearly have traded Courtland Sutton. Yeah, a report came out from The Athletic that the Ravens and the Broncos were almost done with finalizing a deal to send him across the country, but Denver ultimately got cold feet and they pulled out. Now, this is what Jeff Zierback from The Athletic, who covers the Ravens, said. At one point, there appeared to be a deal to be made for Courtland Sutton, but the Denver Broncos decided they didn't want to trade him. Now, Bleacher Report included a couple of destinations of their own for number 14, and they had the Detroit Lions and the New York Giants. Now, the Lions makes a lot of sense, right? They have the best roster they've had in a long time, probably since Stafford and Calvin Johnson were at the start of their careers, and they have a need at wide receiver after Jameson Williams got suspended 6 games for gambling. Now, when you look at the Giants wide receiver room, you can also see why they would be interested in a guy like Courtland Sutton, because he would step onto that team's roster and probably be the number one wide receiver, right? I mean, he's better than Isaiah Hodgins. Sterling Shepard, unfortunately, can never quite stay healthy. Wan'Dale Robinson was a day 2 pick of theirs last year who suffered a torn ACL early in the year. Darius Slayton is just a roller coaster of an experience. And Paris Campbell was an all-time bust who had a good year during a contract season. They did draft Jalen Hyatt, the Biletnikoff winner from Tennessee this past draft, so maybe they are all good on wide receiver after drafting him, but they're coming off not just a playoff appearance last year, but a playoff win on the road against the Vikings. So I could see why the Giants might feel like, you know what, let's kind of put our chips in the middle of the table. Let's go get a trade and get Courtland Sutton and give Daniel Jones some real pieces to work with and not Isaiah Hodgins and Sterling Shepard and some other young and, pieces that are more projects than guarantees. Now, if a trade does happen, we will have you guys covered here at the channel. So don't just be subscribed, but also turn your notifications on. That way, when a trade goes through, you guys get the notification that we're either going live on the channel or a video has come out covering the trade. So hit that notification bell, select it to all, and you will thank me later. Now, the reason why we're talking about Courtland Sutton getting traded now, because, well, let's be honest, we've had this conversation countless times this offseason, and I too am getting a bit tired of it, but we are approaching June 1st, and June 1st is an important date in the NFL schedule because a lot of contracts at that point, you can spread the dead money over the next 2 years. So if you don't want to eat all the dead money right now, after June 1st, you can splice it in half and spread it between 2023 and 2024. So Courtland Sutton's base salary, that's what a team would be taking on, is $14 million. The cap savings, if they trade him after June 1st, is $14.4 million. His dead cap hit is $3.8 million, and his 2024 dead cap hit is $7.6. So there are some savings to be had if Denver were to trade Courtland Sutton after June 1st. I think I said release earlier. Ignore that. I meant trade. If they were to trade him after June 1st, $14 million in savings. Like, a GM likes $14 million in savings for a player who, let's be honest, has not lived up to that contract extension he got 2 years ago. My, hiccup, if you will, is if Denver got cold feet with the Ravens, why would they go through with it now? I think they're not going to find a better offer pre-draft, because if you get an offer pre-draft, you get a pick, and then you get to see that pick play out in 2023. Now you don't have Courtland Sutton if you trade him, after the draft, And that pick you're going to get, well, that player won't be on your team in 2023. So good chance they might want more because they're not getting a player in Courtland Sutton. And then the pick, which would then turn into a player, they also don't get this season as well. So you're kind of out 2 players if you trade them after the draft. So I just don't see why Denver would, A, want to do this after the draft unless they're really all about saving money, which, have you noticed anything this offseason? The Walton Penners do not care about saving money at all. They are burning through it. They love to spend money. They have FU money. They are that kind of rich. So if they didn't get a deal done now, unless they get an offer they can't refuse, I just don't see a reason why they would go ahead with a trade again. Unless the Giants come in and blow them out of the water, that changes everything. But it doesn't appear that there's a big market for Courtland Sutton. There's a lot of calls that got made, but no one wanted to come to Denver's asking price. So why would they do that now? Okay, now let's remind everyone that Courtland Sutton is a bit of a polarizing is mean because he's such a great player. I like Courtland Sutton as a person and as a player. He's a captain. He's a leader in this locker room. I'm a Courtland Sutton fan. What I'm not a fan of is 4 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons and what appears to be, unfortunately, a ACL injury that just keeps showing its rear ugly head, and you can't seem to quite move on from it and get back to that 1,000-yard season he had back in 2019. Now, another reason why Denver might be more open to making a trade is when they look ahead here and realize, holy smokes, we are spending a ton in the wide receiver room for 2024. Courtland Sutton and Tim Patrick combined $30 million. Add Jerry Jeudy's 5th-year option on, $32 million, some change, 33, 34, add in Marvin Mims. We're talking about a $35 million wide receiver room. That is, I believe, the most expensive in the NFL. So don't be blown away if Denver either A, moves on from Courtland Sutton altogether after this season because he's got no dead money after 2023, and if they're already down that path, maybe they decide, let's just get the trade down. Let's just get the trade over with now while his value maybe is as high as it's going to be because if he has a bad start to the season, well, teams are not going to be offering what they would have been offering preseason for him. So predict it for me. Will Sutton get traded before week 1? Y for yes or N for no? Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments section below if you think the Paytons ultimately do deal one of these wide receivers before week 1 kicks off. My prediction, I think Courtland Sutton only gets moved in the preseason if a training camp injury happens, right? Remember when Jordy Nelson got hurt, for example, or if when Tim Patrick went down, if Denver wanted to trade for a wide receiver. Unless a number 1 or number 2 receiver on a contending team loses their receiver for the whole season or a huge chunk of it, I don't see him getting traded between now and week 1. Now, after the season starts, if Courtland Sutton is having a good year and Denver is losing games, like Bradley Chubb, he very well could be a midseason trade candidate. But Denver had a pretty high asking price before the draft. No one met it. And if they did meet it, Denver still got cold feet and backed out if the Ravens report is true. So unless someone is going to blow them out of the water for an offer now, I just don't see why Denver would ultimately pull the trigger on a deal. Now, next up on the show, I want to discuss a potential breakout candidate. So Pro Football Focus put out breakout candidates for all 32 teams. We're going to see who they picked for Denver. But before we look at that, make sure to check out our great deal today, which is a 2-shirt combo. You get a short sleeve and a long sleeve t-shirt when you go to chatsports.com/DEN combo. That link's in the comments and the description of today's video. Now, the long-awaited breakout candidate is Greg Dulcich, the flow, the hammy, sun's out, guns out. So he was a 3rd-round pick, if you recall, back in 2022. He suffered a nagging hamstring injury during rookie minicamp/OTAs at some point last May/June. And he really was MIA for all of training camp, right? He just could not get back on the field for a long time. So they started the season off on IR with Dulcich. He missed the first 5 weeks as a result. But once he arrived, his first game, if you remember, was that Monday Night Football game against the Chargers. He scored the first touchdown of the game 3 minutes into the game on that long route down the right sideline. So Dulcich, after that, kind of took off a little bit for a rookie who missed a lot of very important things in training camp as a rookie. Now, this is what PFF had to say. While his 60.4 overall grade was good for only 41st among tight ends, it was heavily influenced by his blocking struggles. When looking at only his receiving grade, he ranked 24th among tight ends. Furthermore, between Week 7 and Week 13, when he was playing at his best, he ranked 6th among tight ends in receiving yards and PFF receiving grade. Dulcich last year for Denver, 33 grabs, 411 yards, 2 touchdowns. He only played 10 games. So if you're wondering, what would that have looked like if you stretched out those stats over a 17-game season? Here are his pro-rated stats. He would have had, again, just by the books, 93.5 targets, 56 grabs, 698 yards, and 3.4 touchdowns. So for an offense that was as inept as it was last year, yeah, I could definitely see why Dulcich, if he played a full season and caught 700 yards worth of receiving yards, why that would make him a very good sleeper breakout candidate for 2023. He showed a ton of potential in the receiving department. Again, not the best blocker necessarily, and that's a big hurdle that tight ends usually have to overcome when going from the collegiate ranks to the pros. But Denver knew what they drafted in round 3 with the former UCLA Bruin. They weren't looking for his blocking expertise. They wanted his receiving abilities, and there were plenty of great flashes of that last season once he was finally able to get on the field. So he, too, is my breakout pick for 2023. Now, some other candidates. Does Jerry Jeudy count as a breakout candidate? Like, he's right there on the line. At some point, you can't break out because you've just been in the league for a little bit too long. But if he goes over 1,000 yards, like, boom, that's a breakout season for Jerry Jeudy. I think Quinn Miners has a real possibility of asserting himself as one of the league's best interior offensive linemen. Zach Allen has never gone above 5.5 sacks in a season. He had that number last year. Hand injury cut his season short. He's prime with Vance Joseph, still as DC, to have a really good 2023 year. Baron Browning, he's going to get a lot of reps. He's going to get a lot of snaps, so he's a breakout candidate in my book. And then I'll include Damari Mathis if he fights off Riley Moss for that starting CB2 job opposite Pat Surtain. He's another breakout candidate. I don't think you can be a rookie and be a breakout, right? I mean, the whole point is like second, third-year guys who are just right there at the surface but haven't quite poked through. So I'm not including any rookies as breakout candidates. But name who will have a breakout season. Do you think it's Dulcich? Do you think it's one of those 5 guys we just looked at? Or is it someone else I completely forgot about? Let me know who your breakout candidate is. I'm going to go with the flow, Greg Dulcich. I think in an offense like Sean Payton, which, hey, look what Jimmy Graham did in that offense, you could see a lot of targets come over to Dulcich. So give me Greg Dulcich like 5 touchdowns, 700 yards. That'd be a pretty good breakout season in my book for him. Now, some quick news I want to hit on here, just in the whole NFL world. Rap Sheet tweeting out the NFL bylaw on allowing a third QB to be active without burning a roster spot was approved. So the NFL are having some league meetings in Minneapolis. A bunch of rules are getting voted on. And this was an important one because if you remember the NFC Championship game, there was no extra emergency quarterback for the 49ers. So we got to see Christian McCaffrey in the shotgun. But the Broncos lens of this is the winner between Ben DiNucci and Jared Garantano for the QB3 spot. They get to be on the active roster on game day, so good for them. They get to wear a jersey and hang out. Hopefully we never see them, but that is the rule. So with that being said, thank you all so much for tuning in. Apologies for just not having it today. Getting my wisdom teeth taken out earlier this weekend. It has really taken the wind out of my sails. Hopefully I'll be close to 100% tomorrow or Wednesday, but I'll see everyone later.